Hi, everyone. This is Sandra Rojo, and thank you again for tuning into another Journey to Authentic Living video. I just want to make sure my sound is going so that we can kind of continue this video. Also, before I begin my discussion or initiating my discussion, I want to say that I had some dental work done and they had to numb my bottom tooth. So my mouth might be a little funky. So hopefully it won't be too crooked. But then again, I'm not very proportioned. So it'll be like a little moving Picasso picture. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is doing your own work and what that means. I'd like to sort of bring in a group of people who I'm addressing here, and that would be therapists, would be coaches, will be anyone in the really, I guess, maybe healthcare, industry, people that are working with others one-on-one or in groups of people. And I also want to bring in the New Agers because somehow, some way, this sort of overlaps into spirituality and into some of the healing art practices, and in that sense, you do bring in clients as well. Some of you know that I am a shamanic practitioner. I've been practicing for many years now. I come from the Sandra lineage, and I studied with Roxanne Roberts for many years, and then people in Mexico. So I'm not picking on anyone in particular. But I also feel called to talk about this subject because it needs to be talked about. So if you are a client, this will address you as well, but primarily for people that are practitioners. What it means to do work on yourself, that even if you are a therapist and a coach, you need to be able to address your shit. You need to address your problems so that you can be the best you can for your client. So no avoiding the inner work. And it's really interesting because as someone who has had extensive training and is degreed in coaching, I find it daunting and alarming to hear, to meet, and to witness people who are trying to grow their own client-centered based practice and don't have the ethical foundation or guidelines to what that means to hold space for someone, to facilitate, to coach, right? I encounter quite a bit of this actually in the nutrition, I guess, niche areas. I know a lot of people that consider themselves nutritional coaches, yet don't have a degree in nutrition, or they say they're a dietitian and they don't have that background. I don't mean to offend anyone, but I will say that you just reading a book on nutrition or going to Nutrition for Dummies and buying those dummy books is not going to make you a nutritionist, and it's not going to make you a dietitian, and it's not going to make you a licensed therapist, and it's not going to make you a bona fide coach. It just is not. Those books are tools. They're for your knowledge, for your education, to enhance your practice, to bring awareness to maybe certain concepts or terminology, but it does not make you an expert by going down to the Barnes & Noble or Amazon and buying these books, and then all of a sudden you become an expert. The reason why I'm such a stickler when it comes to these things is because honestly, if you promote yourself as a healthcare provider or a coach or a licensed therapist, think about it. You have people that you're working with. You're dealing with other people's lives. And you have to know what you're doing. Now, does this mean you can't occasionally say a faux pas, or that maybe you accidentally, I don't know, said something? I mean, we're not talking about perfection here. We're just talking about being ethical. If you say something that's out of line, or you offended your client accidentally, or you didn't mean unintentionally, you didn't mean to, then you apologize. This is owning your stuff too, because sometimes that happens, right? You don't mean to, or the client is really emotional and you just don't mean to. It happens when you're working closely with a client. It happens. Projections happen, transference happens. It's kind of acceptable, if you will, if you're working like you expect that from your clients. Your clients will project on you and then transfer. And Carl Rogers, the great Carl Rogers, the therapist and the professor, he talked about this in one of his books. And I have his book, I think, somewhere in here that sort of talks about that. But it's not okay if you're the coach or the therapist and you're doing this towards your client. And listen to that carefully. You can be triggered, you can be maybe provoked or something like that. Something will come up because you're a human being, but it's not appropriate for you to assign blame or to assign some responsibility to your client. If you're doing that, you need help. You need to go into therapy. You need immediately to like go into therapy. Okay. So I don't have a problem with saying this because I'm somebody that does her inner work. I've been doing my inner work way before I was a coach and before I became degreed in psychology and before I had extensive training and all this stuff. For me, going to therapy, reading books, getting help, going to leadership training, being involved in leadership positions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is just kind of part of it. It's all part of the personal development. Okay. And especially now, because we are so overwhelmed with people trying to sell their services. Everybody seems to be an expert in, psychology, it seems. Or somebody knows how to tell you or try to help you try to eat better or whatever. I don't, without getting too much into that. In strict coaching, let's just take coaching and kind of dissect it a little bit. In strict coaching, if the purity of coaching, if you will, and according to the International Coach Federation, ICF, I'm giving highlights here only. A good coaching candidate is an individual who has intrinsic motivation for the most part. Doesn't mean that they can't feel discouraged or down or cry or feel lost. That's all normal. It's always normal anyway to feel those things when you're approaching a practitioner. But if the client has many mental health challenges and or is suffering from depression, severe depression, and a plethora of other issues, and they are seeing a therapist, you have to be very careful, okay, to work with someone in that way. And I wouldn't recommend, and neither the way I was indoctrinated, neither do other professional coaches. They kind of educate you and tell you that it's really important that when you're working alongside an individual, that their therapist knows that they're working with you as well. Or for example, if you do have diabetes and you're managing diabetes and you hire a coach to help you manage diabetes and maybe help you manage with your glucose levels and your exercise and all that kind of good stuff, it is extremely important that you tell your general practitioner, your medical doctor, whoever that is, about your coaching relationship so that the doctor knows. And also that as a coach, you know that your client is going to the doctor. Okay. So this isn't just about protecting you as a coach or a healthcare, or, I'm just going to speak to health, a coach. Yeah. Let's just talk about it. Or even a licensed therapist. It's not just about protecting you, you're protecting the client. That's really important. So, when a client comes to me, when they want to give because I do give 15-20 minute free consultations, we see if we're a right fit with each other. I mean, I ask them a few questions, I get to know them, and then I kind of see, okay, is this person really a coaching candidate, or would they benefit more with therapy, for example? Again, this is not a black and white. I'm just generalizing. I'm just trying to give you a feel of this, because doing your own work has a lot to do with this. Sorry, I was totally interrupted, and so I lost my train of thought. Okay, but doing your own work is very important. Okay. Now, why did I bring in the new age folks into this, and the spirituality? What does this have to do with it? Because as somebody who is a shamanic practitioner trained by people of integrity, I come from the Sandra lineage. I trained with several people out of country. I've been doing shamanism for a very long time. I understand, and even there's guidelines, certain guidelines as to how to comport yourself with your client. Okay, because what we're talking about is integrity here. Okay, when and I'm also a Reiki master teacher, and I do other modalities and so forth. One of the things that I've noticed oftentimes is that the practitioner is very eager to gain clients, or the practitioner is eager to work on the other person. I'm here to say that the best investment, the best time that you can spend on working on someone is you. That is the absolute best investment. When you work on yourself, everything else falls into place, because you want to show up for your client. You want to be present. You want to be clear. You want to be clean. You want to be prepared. And when we are this way, we're a clear channel. We don't come with our agenda. We don't come with our triggers. We don't come with, I don't want whatever that thing is. Because if you're coming into things with that, or even with the self-righteous, arrogant attitude with your client, you better get out of your business. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of people out there like that, and they give me, and they give people like even, Rosie, who I've talked, well, I can't speak for her, but they give professional people, they give us a bad reputation. Even as being a coach, it's like people are like, like, what is a coach? And I kind of have an aversion to the label coach, because like everyone's a coach. It's even boring. It's like the coach for this and the coach for that. And so you can tell that I just, and so I have to explain. But, I understand that it is about informing and educating. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm informing and educating you. And it's okay if you don't even resonate with anything I say here. You are free to believe and to do as you wish. I just feel it's time for some of us practitioners to speak up about this and to begin a dialogue, right, about all this. It's just a really interesting dynamic, to encounter other people who help, or supposedly help, people with nutrition, like I was saying before. And they have no clue or very little. And again, it's not about just reading the book. So doing your own work, and I just wrote down my notes because I kind of liked what I have to say, is you work through your own stuff. You work through your own shit. You work with your own shit with other people. You work with your own problems and you resolve them. You don't have to resolve and be perfect in order to become a healthcare provider, because there's no such thing. There isn't some perfected, enlightened state, where you are the expert and there is like you're on this high mountaintop looking down upon the flock of people who need you. I'm saying this because there's actually people who believe that. It's going within, knowing that you're human, loving and liking yourself regardless of your shortcomings, and moving forward and not bringing that to a session. Can you share an experience with a client? Can you relate to maybe what they're saying? Absolutely. But you're not going to take up their whole session just talking about you, right? That would be another indication of you not doing your work. And for those of you who are potential clients, you'll kind of get an idea, of what I'm talking about, because it's okay to interview people. It's okay to interview therapists. It's okay to interview coaches and find out where they're at. It's okay to say, where are you with your inner work? What are you doing? Type of thing. It's okay to ask those questions. And that just because the therapist or coach comes back to you and says, oh, well, I'm doing this, or I love whatever, doesn't guarantee you that they're actually that way. Only through the relationship will you get to feel if that trust is established, because trust is established. It's a bond that you create with that individual. I'm going to give a couple of examples. Okay, so I was talking about the alternative, or the people who, are in spirituality and do new age things and things like that. I had several experiences that were out of integrity. I wouldn't call them negative experiences, because I really learned vicariously through these experiences, and feel very blessed that I wasn't the one that did this or said this. So when I was living in Colorado, I was, well, like even now, you're traveling and doing things and going to seminars and keeping up with credentials and so forth. Well, I had enrolled in a training class that was going to last for quite some time, and really loved the teacher and really trusted her immensely. And she had an assistant, and mind you, he was not a teacher, he was her assistant, who during the course of the training really had sort of a chip on his shoulder, apparently, and used the group. And I'm sure we weren't the only group, because they were holding different classes. So I'm sure we weren't the only group. He sort of used this as a platform for his political ranting. And it wasn't just an opinion he gave. I mean, he went off, and he was very inflammatory, to be honest with you. That's an indication of an individual who is not doing his work and should be. When you're a teacher, when you're a coach, when you're a therapist, when someone's paying you for a service, you don't know what their political affiliation is, do you? So even just by you listening to this, you can totally tell where this is going. I mean, it's just inappropriate. And especially it's interesting because some of you already know this, I've shared this, that I have a family on both sides that are very mixed. We have left, right, in the middle, politically, right? So I'm not threatened by any of that. I find it interesting and exciting, and I'm curious, and we have discussions and of all shades and sides of a political party and concepts and things like that. People make a lot of assumptions about who they're talking to. So because somebody signs up or enrolls in a spiritual class or training, doesn't mean that they're liberal. So you should never make the assumption that people are always liberal, or that they have a certain type, or because someone owns a gun and you might overhear that they are diehard NRA conservative people, right? So as you can hear this kind of talk, it's just inappropriate. It's really inappropriate to bring these. Now, if you're being paid to talk about politics, that's a whole completely different story. This same individual, in a different occasion, actually a student, a colleague of mine who was also taking this class, drives a Mercedes-Benz, and felt targeted by this particular assistant, because this particular assistant in one of the rants was talking about how, there's so many materialistic people out there, and that people are only after money, and kind of this type of rhetoric, and used in this one conversation to all of us about how people who drive high-end vehicles like Mercedes-Benzes are very materialistic and they should be ashamed of themselves, and kind of this type of talk. So those are just two examples that you can monitor if an individual is doing their work. I mean, a teacher would not, in my opinion, would not, right? We want to leave all that out. We want to be inclusive. We don't want to marginalize anyone. We don't want to marginalize people, not because we just got to tell the truth, or we just got to say it like it is and they just got to take it. We don't want to marginalize people because we don't know the kind of empowerment, the kind of inspiration that we have inside of us. Because when you're doing your own work, you have a tendency to really respect other people. You don't, as long as they're not hurting children and doing whatever, and they have a certain ideology. I mean, at the end of the day, we just don't want to marginalize people. It's really none of our business the way other people live, unless we're seeing somebody hurt, like a child, or they're hitting an elderly or something, a vulnerable individual, and we're right there watching it, not doing anything about it. So doing your own work is about integrity. It's about integrity, and yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's kind of what I wanted to share, and open this discussion about that, and hopefully be able to have more discussions. I have a lot of experience actually with what I'm talking about by watching other people. And before I let this video go, I've seen this a lot in sort of these spiritual realms, or in these alternative healing modalities, where many people just feel very self-righteous. And be aware of that. Be aware of that. It's one thing to be self-confident, and it's another to be self-righteous and arrogant and condescending and abusive, and intentionally marginalizing people because they may think differently than you, or they may live differently than you. It doesn't give anybody the right. We have rights now. If people are gay and people of minority groups, we shouldn't marginalize Christians, and we shouldn't marginalize people who, I don't know, may believe in the Second Amendment or whatever. We never know how we're going to influence people, how they can influence us, and we can influence them in a positive way. I'm speaking about a positive way. Even if you have somebody in front of you that is completely opposite, when you can have an enriching conversation where you have true understanding and they have true understanding, that's the gift. That's the gift. Okay, I'm going to let you go. If you have any questions, comment below. Please subscribe to our channel because it really does help us, as you may already know. And again, thank you for tuning in. Bless all of you and encouraging you to live authentically. Take care. Ciao.